Hello students, we're covering Module 5 now, which includes behavioral psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral psychotherapy. The one thing that I would tell you right up front about behavioral therapy is that it is not today as narrow as it once was, and we're going to talk about the new aspects of behavioral therapy. But before we get into the specifics and the highlights of the therapies, I want to tell you that, first of all, this lines right up with the objectives out of your syllabus, this study does, because we're going over the founders, the key concepts, the basic assumptions, the primary techniques, role of the counselor, and multicultural considerations for these three theories. There's a lot of different named theories in these, and they are highlighted on this slide at the bottom here, including REBT and reality or choice therapy. We're going to go over those. Your D2L content includes the following. There's this introductory video. There's the PowerPoint that accompanies this introductory video. And there are two different PowerPoints, one solely on behavioral therapy and another on cognitive and cognitive behavioral theories. Now, I don't want you to be concerned about which one belongs in which category. We're just going to cover them all, and you don't have to remember whether one is behavioral and whether it's cognitive behavioral. So just know that they all fit sort of in the same category. There's a video that you're going to be watching on a demonstration of cognitive behavioral therapy, and the way to access that video is going to be found in your directions for study. And of course, we'll have 2 different weeks of directions for study in this module, which covers 2 weeks. In D2L also, there's a worksheet for one of the theories, rational emotive behavioral therapy. And this worksheet will help you understand that theory. Also in D2L, you'll see an example of a treatment plan, which is really, really important in this type of therapy. You're going to access the video, as I mentioned, according to the directions in the study sheet, but you're going to do it through going to the Shared Library web page. The directions are all right there on your sheet, and you shouldn't have any problem getting to the video. The discussion area, as I mentioned before, will have 2 weeks, and there's two different initial post deadlines. October 22nd for the first week and October 29th for the second week. Let's talk about the assessment right up front. We'll talk about the end at the beginning. There's 20 multiple choice questions. And if you have gone through the PowerPoints, treating the PowerPoints like text, like the text you would be studying from, and you have gone over the video, and you have looked at everything that's in D2L from a content standpoint, you should do really well on the assessment. But note that if you know the theories matched up with the founders, the concepts, and even some phrases that match up to specific theories, you're going to do well on the assessment. The steps in the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy video, are on the assessment, so be sure you get those steps out of the video. There's 3 phases of cognitive behavioral modification therapy. You're going to need to know that on the assessment. The types of cognitive behavioral or behavioral therapy that are in vogue today will be on there. EMDR, REBT, reality choice, DBT, just to name a few. Sounds like acronym soup, but you'll know what those are once you've studied the PowerPoint presentations. And know this too, that from a cognitive behavioral standpoint, what cognitive behavioral added to cognitive and to behavioral is a lot of teaching skills to the client. So psychoeducation is what we call that. So let's go right on through this PowerPoint and look at the highlights of behavioral therapy. There are these characteristics. I believe there are 5 of all behavioral therapies, whose father is B.F. Skinner, by the way. It's always evidence-based, using a scientific method of proof to show that it is effective and productive. It always begins with a formal assessment. There is a test. You remember we studied assessments back in Module 2 about counseling. So this always, with behavioral therapy, you will start with an assessment. And there's always precise treatment goals that are reached collaboratively between the therapist and the client. It's a totally collaborative goal setting for therapy situation. Then those goals are laid out in a treatment plan that you have an example of in D2L that includes the objective, the date when these objectives are to be met, who's responsible for meeting the objective, and how the follow-up is going to take place. And that treatment plan is rigidly followed in behavioral therapy. And then there's always this ongoing objective analysis and evaluation of how are we doing based on the goals. So a client would come to the therapist, and one of the first things in the session might be pull out the treatment plan and let's see how we're doing according to the goals that we set right up front. Now, these are just highlights. This will not take the place of your looking thoroughly and studying the PowerPoint presentation on behavioral therapy and on cognitive and cognitive behavioral therapy. So these are just merely highlights I'm giving you here, okay? Cognitive therapy introduces the concept of cognitive distortions. Sometimes in the vernacular, we therapists call that stinking thinking. These things that are like, I must be loved by everyone, or, if I don't get into this master's degree program, I'm going to die. Those cognitive things that that determine how we react and determine our feelings, named by Aaron Beck as cognitive distortions. Then we move on to cognitive behavioral therapy, of which there are many modes today. But overall, there's a 3-phase process of change in most of the cognitive behavioral therapy models. And today we do more in awareness and self-awareness through relaxation training, meditation techniques, and becoming aware of ourselves by slowing down. So the 3-phase process begins with self-observation and what Donald Mickenbaum called awareness. And then a new internal dialogue is created in this process of change, where those cognitive distortions are disputed. Is that always true? And then this new internal dialogue, a reframing and a restructuring happens. The third of the 3-phase process is that the new skills are learned. And once you have that new belief system, then you act on it by practicing skills and learning new skills in therapy, and that's called restructuring. Now, there's no way that I am going to take time right now to cover all this variety of models of CBT, but there's rational emotive behavioral therapy, Albert Ellis's model of this therapy, cognitive behavioral modification, Donald Mickenbaum, reality therapy, which is really interesting in that it is so simple and understandable, and it's based on choice theory. William Glasser, if you want to take the time to go look at any of these on YouTube or Google them, there's probably demonstrations of these, but that's not in your D2L content. Dialectical behavioral therapy is very, very effective with borderline personality disorder pathologies. And It was started by Marsha Linehan, and Marsha was a trained Buddhist, and she brought the awareness and meditation of Buddhism and Eastern religion and Eastern techniques to behavior therapy. It's very, very interesting, and it works. EMDR is a type of therapy used in the diagnosis of PTSD. Very effective, empirically based. I hope you have some time to research it a little bit, because it is based on REM sleep, the eye movement of the eyes and REM sleep. I have been trained in EMDR, and I have found it very effective, especially with clients who have suffered trauma. So EMDR, Francine Shapiro. And then there's acceptance and commitment therapy, Stephen Hayes. And it is so in the here and now and in the present moment, and is just kind of what it says. It's called ACT, but it's the acceptance of it is what it is, and it becomes what I make of it. It's the commitment to change that needs to take place. And it is a very popular therapy now, and is a newer model of cognitive behavioral therapy. I mentioned cognitive behavioral modification by Mickenbaum. We talked about Albert Ellis's rational emotive behavioral therapy, in which there are 3 basic musts. Look at those. You might see those on the assessment. And then the ABC framework is a document that is actually in your D2L content. And it talks about the disruption of beliefs that are behind our actions. Reality therapy by Glasser, in which the client has an ideal world, and most of the time this ideal world has to do with a social setting. We begin to see the social aspect of therapy come in, and we'll follow in our next module, and the postmodern module. And of course there are other contemporary models as well. The strengths multiculturally of behavioral and cognitive behavioral therapy are given here on the slide. And then there are, of course, weaknesses as well. The most important strength, I think, is that there's a focus on task orientation and objectivity. But at the same time, that can be a weakness, because there's not a lot of context about the person's social environment there. So know these multicultural aspects as well. Good luck in the discussions and in the assessment, and know the basic things that we are learning in each of the modules, the founders, the basic assumptions, the key concepts, primary techniques, role of the counselor, and the multicultural considerations. There's a lot that I haven't gone over in this introductory module, as I had mentioned before, but hopefully you don't need to hear these things twice. Just study hard.